Awesome. Thanks for introducing me, Harles, sorry. And thank you all for attending the very first short track of the day. I'm Sharanya. I'm a senior software engineer at Slack. I have been responsible for scaling automated tests at Slack, as well as evangelize accessibility testing at Slack. Today, I'm going to talk about building and testing with empathy. Empathy. It is the ability to understand what someone's going through. And it is very fundamental to product development because more often than not, you're building products for your users, right? And this is key to building a successful product. And many of us just don't know what all that entails. With that being said, I'm going to focus on a very special space of product development, which is how would you build products for people with disabilities? In this session, I will cover the basics of what accessibility means, how different types of impairments inhibit day-to-day use of technology, and also provide approaches for building inclusive software products. Hot tip, accessibility is also known as ALI or A11Y, which is an alphanumeric acronym of the same word. Accessibility, by definition, refers to the design of products, services, devices, and also environment, for people who experience disabilities. Oftentimes, we associate disability as a human condition. I want to clarify that it's not a human condition. It means limited interaction. And so, with that emphasis, I'm also going to showcase how you would want to phrase that. You would say a person has some form of disability rather than a person is disabled. It's a very fine line on how you would want to say that. When people talk about developing for accessibility, people think, oh yes, I have checked that list in my things to do. But it's not. It's more fundamental than that. For me, it's a core tenet of equality. And if your product is not accessible, think about it. You are denying information to those users. It's a big deal. And so with that, I am saying that accessibility must be non-negotiable in any sort of product development. So some stats here. 1 in 7 users in the world has some form of impairments. Can you take a guess how many users in European Union actually are disabled? Any guess? That's 80 million people. 80 million. And this is expected to rise 120 million in 1.5 years by 2020. That's because we have a lot of people we have an aging population. So no one's getting younger. And so if you do make your product accessible, it means you provide equal access to your content, you increase your product's market share, you're most likely following cleaner code design patterns, and a bonus is your application is a lot more performant. And you also stay ahead of the curve because European Union Accessibility Standards Directive is coming into effect this September. So by next year, a lot of public sector websites in the EU is going to start conforming to the standards. And apart from these, say you have a customer in the US, or you are testing for companies that are in the US, there are US legislations and laws. And there have been lawsuits that have been happening since 2000. And the last 3 years, there have been 23% of lawsuits that have happened ever since 2000. It's a staggering number. So now that I walk through the reasons why you should care, you might want to know what the typical types of disabilities that affect web use. So one is visual, auditory, motor, and cognitive. In visual, people can't see your text on the application. So you might want to explore the options of zoom functionality, increasing color contrast, inverting colors, or even screen readers, because that's how they rely on information. A person who's blind may not be able to read anything on your application, so they would rely on screen readers in that case. And auditory, people, so you must have seen YouTube videos where you have closed captioning and other embedded information that would help people who can't hear to process the information better. And for motor disabilities, people can't interact in any way except for in a special assistive device, hardware devices, or just by simple keyboard navigation. Say if you have carpal tunnel, you can't use mouse for the entire day. It's going to tax your hands. So even as simple as that, keyboard navigation is going to help a lot of users. And finally, cognitive, a lot of people have attention deficiency disorders. So if you have your page very well structured, it provides a lot more focus on the content that they want to read. So to support the needs of people with different forms of disabilities, most OSs provide some sort of support. You might have seen in Mac, I'm an avid Mac user, and a lot of people who need some extra functionality, they rely on third-party softwares. A couple of them are JAWS and Natural Reader, where people sometimes lean on Natural Reader because it's more human-like when it reads something from the screen. So it's it's their choice of what they want to use and according to their needs. And that is not all. Ally is a field where augmented reality and artificial intelligence are also playing key roles in improving someone's lives. Imagine you take a photo on one of your phones, and the software actually reads out what the object is, what color of the object is, and say if it's a human or a pet, it would also say what the expression is. So imagine a person who can't see anything would actually start visualizing what's happening in front of them. It's life-changing. And building for accessibility can be tricky without legislations and guidelines. So one of them is WCAG, or Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and they have 3 levels under the WCAG. Levels A, AA, and AAA, AAA being the most stringent of all. And as far as the legislations go, the European Accessibility Act, it specifies not only the technological aspect, but also the digital aspect of the system. So even your ATMs need to be accessible, your ticketing machines, etc. And finally, Section 508 is US-based. It requires all federal employees to have equal content to equal access to content. And here, different legislations are very specific to the country or locale. So your country might be very different from US, etc. And some certain standards have been happening since 1985. The adoption rate has been risen to 40 countries now, and it's going to grow more. So this will be the new norm in years to come. So developing in accessibility is not going to happen. It is coming. So that's another reason for us to be very prepared. So now you must be wondering how to do this right. First of all, know your users well. If you do not know your users, you might lose focus. So that means do user research, usability studies, surveys, and also feedback loop. Those are very critical in improving your product. And second, prioritize based on what you got from your users. And third, include accessibility in designing phase. This is really important to success, because accessibility should not be an afterthought. A lot of times you build your product and then you think about, oh, I should do this, and then no, it doesn't work that way. Trust me. And finally, I have to warn you, I have seen a lot of companies think they know it all, and they start over-engineering or overdoing things, which can actually patronize your users. It's a very, very fine line between knowing what to build and between thinking, yes, I know it all and I'm building for accessible users. So do a lot of user research. Let's briefly take a look at building for accessibility. WCAG operates on 4 core principles. One is the application has to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So keeping these principles in mind, let me walk through how you may make your product follow these principles. Firstly, I'm going to talk about the visual part. The first and foremost rule is to focus on the page structure, because that's how screen readers are going to interpret how to read your content. If your page structure does not have a proper header or a footer, then the screen readers are going to get confused completely. And in order to do this effectively, use semantic HTML as much as possible. So in this example, you can see that I'm sure you must have seen a lot of websites using just divs and spans. And I know that it offers you how you can control the structure or layout of your page and also cross browsers without having to reset CSS. But trust me, if you were to use your semantic HTML, those controls are for free. And it's a lot more performant, and it comes with accessibility APIs under the hood. So as an example, if I want to build a button on a page, I would rather use a button tag instead of doing a div with a role that is a button. So it's a lot cleaner. It tells the browser what it's supposed to do, and it also tells the developer what it is. So when you have a structure to your page, you can use typography to enhance readability of your content. How many of you, again, have struggled to differentiate between letter I, L, 1? It's just so confusing. It's so confusing, like really confusing. So WebAIM is another website, which is web accessibility in mind, where they tell you how to actually use some of these font families, font styles, font sizes, and weights that would adhere to some of the people, that would adhere to accessibility standards. So yeah, then in this example, you can see trebuchet is not a good idea to use. It's not just the fonts that are confusing to people, it's also the colors. A lot of visually impaired people can only see like few colors. Some of them have red-green color differentiation problems, and some people have blurred vision. So it's really important to have contrasting foreground and background. And again, WebAIM gives you a nice contrast checker to actually say, okay, so is this enough for a user to be able to read this content? And in the example down, I'm sure you might have seen websites which would just show colors to say, hey, if this is an error or not, and without a text or warning, right? It would be super confusing for people that don't see the colors. So on the left is something that you would normally see, and the right is something that people who are visually impaired would see. So please do not use only color to convey information. Finally, to put all visual pieces together, users who suffer from short-sightedness, far-sightedness, they heavily use zoom functionalities to read the content of the page. And here in this example, I'm zooming up to 500% and zooming out up to 25%. And the most critical thing is your text needs to be scaling well, and your images need to scale well too. So for text to scale well, use meta tags, and for image, use image tags, and use a scalable vector graphics format so that it plays well with the website. The previous section talked about practices that can help with visual and cognitive impairments. Now let's take a look at how you can make your application operable for people with motor disabilities. So For users with motor impairments, they won't be able to use much of mouse, or they use assistive devices, not just QWERTY keyboards. They have entirely different keyboards. Some of them have a sip and puff devices. So these are like cool sensors that are inside the mouth. They just would puff to actually move throughout the page. So imagine you want to click a button and the button is all the way under like very end of the page. It's going to be very, very hard for them. And also imagine a scenario where you are defining a keyboard shortcut key and they cannot move around different keys. It's just going to be harder for them. So here, navigation includes three main parts. One is moving around the page, and one is being able to tell users where they are currently focused at. So in this, again, in this GIF or GIF, you can, I don't know why. I don't. So in this image, so you can see that this focus ring just nicely flows through different sections of the page. And on the right, it's a blue ring. And on the left, it's a white ring. So it's very important to have a color contrast focus ring to tell your users where they're currently focused at. Else, they're not going to have that idea at all. And finally, yes, I am moving around the page. Now I need to interact with the page. I need to open this button. Sorry, I need to click this button or open this menu. So I use spacebar or enter key to actually activate that. So these are the three key components when I talk about navigation. The good news is HTML5 offers you all of these for free. You do not have to do some special magic to make this work. And it also sets the order of tabbing naturally. So again, if you want something to be out of focus, only then use tab index -1. Else, do not touch the tab indexes. Do not even define your own tab indexes. It's just not going to be helpful. Awesome. Now that we saw the basics of how you could tackle some of the recurring problems in applications, let's take a look at how you would test for the same. As always, first identify, come up with a test plan, test matrix. This is a no-brainer for all of us, I guess. And then you can see, okay, yes, I need to test it in a browser, and I only want to test color contrast functionality or zoom. I can have that test matrix created. And the most important part that I have done in my career is to identify whether some of these can be manually tested or automated tested to adhere to test pyramid principle. And here, automated tests, by that, what I mean is it can be unit tested or your functional test, or it can be a simple rule in your linter to just say, this is not a great idea, like include these tags when you check in your code. Suppose coming up with a test plan or a test matrix, you might want to know how to effectively test your use case, right? I'm going to introduce you to some of the things I have done so far. They may seem simple, but they're super powerful. There are tons of tools that are available to cater to your needs. I have personally used Axe, Totally, VoiceOver, and again, in automation, I've used Axe, Selenium WebDriver, Pally, Tenon. I've used most of these tools. Currently, I've been using Axe and Totally for manual testing, and again, Axe for automated testing, and Selenium WebDriver for extensive testing where I need to check if an element is present in the DOM or not. And again, so one thing that I'd like to warn is these tools can create a lot of noise if you do not know what you're testing for, because they test around all the guidelines, all the legislations. You don't want that. So you just need to be very aware of what you want to test. For example, I just need to check color contrast, stick with that. You can always choose and apply to your manual testing. So Axe and Totally are the two browser extensions that I use. The nice thing about it is once when you download it, you activate that plugin in your Chrome browser or your Firefox browser. And the nice thing about it is, so it says how many violations are found. And then what is the violation? What is the issue? And where is it located in the DOM? And where is the source? And Axe is more extensive. It can test in multiple guidelines. And for Totally, I really like it because it's very, very focused and narrow. And it actually gives me a nicer highlighting where the things have gone wrong. So you can see nice yellow warning symbols versus red, which is a violation. For automation, Axe also provides a lot of integrations. I was talking about focusing what you would want to test. So in these couple of examples, first I'm just expecting one of the elements to adhere to color contrast and check its label. And in the second example, I'm just saying, check for the entire page to adhere to WCAG 2.0 or section 508. And in the third example, you get the idea by now. I can just chain different matchers to check for what I really want. And I have this built in my continuous integration pipeline to say if someone's actually causing a regression, it would immediately catch that issue and tell the developer what's going on. And yes, with this tool, again, it will tell you what the issue description is, what the violation, and where it's happening. So the previous example focuses more on the visual aspect. For testing interaction or navigation, so first I want to know where my focus style ring is. We talked that nice GIF or GIF where I was like moving around the page and I was seeing a nice focus ring. So for that, I have special attributes in the DOM to say if my focus ring is actually active and if it's the element that I want to focus at. So here, I've defined my own helpers to be able to check for that in my application. So here I'm expecting the element to have that focus selector. And I'm actually expecting whether it's focused or not. And I'm also checking if the tab index is equal to 0 or -1, etc. So this is how I can see whether the element is actually present in the DOM. So I know for sure that this will be picked up by screen readers when this code gets shipped out. Awesome. Now that we saw a tiny speck of how you could build for accessibility and test for accessibility, here's some information to learn more. Fortunately, there are guidelines that can talk about HTML5. I would stick to html5accessibility.com, and there's tons of resources in W3C where you can go and start learning more as a starter. And for iOS and Android, stick to developer guidelines. Those are your standards, which would give you in-depth resource of how you can build your product really well for those OSs to work well with their native accessibility support. So for example, iOS has nice voiceover. So when you are building for iOS, make sure you use accessibility index or attributes so that the voiceover can pick up your elements that you have defined. On top of these, if you would like to understand how I did it along with my team, there's a blog post, and there's also a really good book that I would suggest, which is Accessibility for Everyone by Laura. It's a very simple light read. It would give you an analysis of more deeper, in-depth analysis of what I spoke today. And I also did this course in Udacity, which was a great starting point for me. And this year I also spoke at CSUN conference, which is only geared toward assistive technologies, not just software, but also hardware. So if this is something that you would want to pursue in your career, This is also, again, you could go and talk to people and see for yourself how people actually use different devices. And finally, Global Accessibility Awareness Day was just this third Thursday every May. So you could see a lot of products coming up with cool solutions on those Awareness Day. Recently, Apple also announced dark mode for your macOS, which is super, super, helpful for people like me as well. Awesome, cool. I hope my talk served as a starting point for those that wanted to start getting their toes wet in accessibility development and testing. Thank you all for listening, and thanks to the Nordic Testing Days team for giving me an opportunity to speak here. I'll now open the floor for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and as Sharanya already mentioned, then time for questions.
Yay, a lot of questions, I love it.
Thanks for the talk, and my question is about the secondary use of this accessibility technology. Have you encountered that, and what are your thoughts that these APIs are used, for example, getting textual information from graphical interfaces, or using these APIs for example, automating application? I see that there are some tensions. For example, Google closed up accessibility API. I heard. So what are your thoughts using it for secondary purposes? Thank you.
So what do you mean by secondary purpose here?
I mean that I don't have any cognitive impairment, but I use this API, for example, to drive another application with this API, or get textual information that I don't want to look at myself, but automate it via scripting or something like that.
So you want to understand how you could enable it better?
Mainly make my life easier, but I'm not the target group myself, but I use the same tools. So it's a bit like a policy issue. What companies would like their application to use for, and what others actually using it for.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts?
Okay. Here's my approach, if I understood your question right. So here's what I did for my product currently. I've been using different tools, and no tool is perfect. And at first, I also had a hard time understanding if I were doing the right thing for my users or customers. So I started attending those usability sessions and understanding what my target group is. And I had to do an extensive research against the different tools. And like you're saying, there are possibilities that some of the tools may not be approved by your company, but I did not have that experience. So I had the autonomy to analyze different tools and pick and choose what I could plug and play with. The main reason, at least for my current situation, why I chose Axe was also because we have an existing WebDriver automation framework, and I wanted to use something that was not completely from the ground up, and I just wanted to use something that I can integrate and play well. I hope that answers your question. I saw someone here.
Yes, there was 2 questions in front.
Hi there, and thanks again for the speech. I have a general question about how do you try to feel like the audience? Have you tried the special keyboards, or I don't know? Because when I was first testing accessibility, I was literally closing my eyes in order to try to feel like them. To get in their fit.
Yeah.
What are you trying to do, and how do you get closer to them? I don't know. Maybe some sessions. Maybe there is something else where we can find more information about that?
That's a fantastic question. So I have the same trouble. I've been using different hardware devices. I just don't understand it, right? I am not in their shoes. So what I did was I found out few people that were volunteering to be able to partner with me, even within Slack and outside Slack as well. I was able to partner with them, and I could say, hey, like, can we do this thing together? Because there's tons that you can never know, because you're not the user yourself. Unfortunately for me, I've been tag teaming with people who would want to be in that beta group and test with me, and they give me early on feedback. And the conference that I was talking about, I just go there, and people have already like volunteered to just give me to beta test for me as well. So that's been helpful in my career. And also we have people inside Slack who are who have different kinds of impairments, so they also help in testing the product. I could have a better solution, but unfortunately, I think you'd have to partner with someone, because else you just wouldn't know how to do this right.
Thank you, and I must say that there are definitely 2 more questions to you, so please be available.
Yes.
After your speech.
Yes.
And this is thank you from Nordic Testing Day side.
Thank you.
Thank you.